Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're heading to the Pacific Northwest with 7 most disturbing true Oregon horror stories. These stories come from photographers, real estate agents, janitors, nurses, and regular people who saw something in Oregon that they can't explain. Each story is a real nightmare from Oregon's foggy roads, deep forests, and lonely highways where scary things hide in the mist and darkness. These stories come from people who lived through these terrors and will never forget what happened to them. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Midnight for daily true horror stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. Now, let's jump into Oregon's most disturbing mysteries, where beautiful forests and mountains hide things that will give you nightmares. My name is Maya Chen, and I've been doing photography for 8 years now. Started with my dad's old Canon when I was in college, just taking pictures of friends and campus events. After graduation, I got a job at a coffee shop downtown, but I kept my camera with me on weekends. Wedding photography was supposed to be my way out. You know, turn the thing I love into real money. I'm not gonna lie, those first few years were rough. Shooting birthday parties for $50, taking headshots for actors who paid me in coffee. But I kept at it, bought better equipment when I could afford it, took online courses, built up a small Instagram following. The dream was always the same: quit the coffee shop, do photography full-time. That's why when Sarah Martinez called me about her winter wedding at Timberline Lodge, I almost couldn't believe it. $1,500 for one day's work. That was more than I made in a month at the coffee shop. She found me through a friend who'd seen my work at a smaller wedding. Sarah wanted someone fresh and artistic for her mountain wedding. This was it, my big break. I spent 2 weeks planning every shot, downloaded apps to track the sunset times, researched the lodge's layout online, even drove up there the weekend before to scout locations. Timberline Lodge sits on Mount Hood, about an hour east of Portland. Built in the 1930s, all timber and stone with these massive windows that look out over the mountain. It's the kind of place rich people get married when they want something that looks rustic but costs a fortune. The wedding was set for January 15th. Sarah warned me it might snow, but that just made me more excited. Snow makes everything look magical in photos. I packed extra batteries because cold weather drains them fast. Brought my backup camera, all my lenses, extra memory cards. I even bought these little hand warmers to keep my fingers working. I got to the lodge at noon, 3 hours before the ceremony. The staff was setting up chairs in the main hall, arranging flowers everywhere. The smell of wood polish and pine filled the air. Outside, snow was already starting to fall. Just light flakes, perfect for photos. Sarah looked amazing. Her dress was this vintage lace thing that her grandmother wore. She was nervous, which is normal, but happy nervous. Her fiancé Mike kept making her laugh during the getting ready shots. The bridesmaids were all giggly and excited. It felt like every photographer's dream job. The ceremony started at 3. I positioned myself along the side wall where I could catch the natural light from those big windows. The vows were beautiful. Sarah cried. Mike cried. Half the guests cried. I caught it all. My camera was singing. Every shot looked perfect through the viewfinder. That's when I first noticed Claire. She was one of the bridesmaids, wearing the same dusty rose dress as the others. But something about her seemed off. She was pale, really pale, like she hadn't seen sun in months. During the ceremony, she kept appearing in my shots, but whenever I tried to focus on her directly, she'd turn away or step behind someone else. At first, I thought she was just camera shy. Some people hate having their picture taken. I've learned to work around that, get candid shots when they're not looking. But Claire was different. It's like she knew exactly when I was pointing the camera her way. The reception started at 6. The lodge staff had transformed the dining room with string lights and candles. Everyone was drinking, dancing, having a great time. I moved through the crowd, capturing all those spontaneous moments that make wedding photos special. But I kept seeing Claire in my viewfinder. She'd be dancing, then suddenly stop and stare right at my camera. Her expression was hard to read. Not angry, not sad, just intense. Like she was trying to tell me something without words. Around 8 o'clock, I was shooting the dance floor when something caught my eye through my lens. There was a man standing completely still near the back wall. Everyone around him was moving, dancing, but he wasn't. He was just standing there, staring directly at my camera. I lowered my camera to look with my own eyes, but there were too many people. When I raised it again, he was gone. Weird, but not that weird. Weddings are crowded. People move around. The reception ended right at 11. Sarah and Mike were exhausted but glowing. They thanked me about a dozen times and said they couldn't wait to see the photos. I packed up my gear, said goodbye to everyone, and drove home through the snow. My hands were cramped from holding the camera all day, but I felt amazing. This was going to be my portfolio piece. I got home around midnight and fell asleep immediately. The next morning, I woke up excited to start editing. I made coffee, set up my laptop, and connected my camera. 847 photos. A good haul for a wedding that size. I started sorting through them chronologically. The getting ready shots looked great. The ceremony photos were exactly what I'd hoped for. Then I got to the reception photos. That's when I saw him clearly for the first time, in a photo of people dancing. There he was in the background, completely motionless while everyone around him was blurred with movement. He was staring directly at the camera with this intense look that made my stomach turn. I definitely didn't remember seeing him during the wedding. I scrolled to the next photo. There he was again, but closer this time. Same stare, same perfectly still pose. In the third photo, he was standing right behind Sarah, his hand reaching toward her neck. The expression on his face was wrong. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes too wide. It looked hungry. My hands started shaking. I scrolled through more photos, and he was in photo after photo. Always getting closer to Sarah. Always staring at the camera with that awful expression. I counted 31 photos with him in them. In the final photo of the night, he was standing inches from Sarah's face, his mouth opened unnaturally wide, like he was about to scream. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah. It rang 4 times before she answered. "Maya, is everything okay?" "Hey, Sarah. Sorry to bother you so early. I'm going through the photos, and I need to ask you about someone. There's a man who appears in several shots. Tall, dark hair, kind of gaunt-looking. He was wearing a black suit. Do you know who that might be?" The line went quiet for a long moment. Can you describe him more?" "He has this scar through his left eyebrow. Really intense eyes. He was standing near the back during the reception." Sarah started crying. "Maya, you just described my ex-boyfriend Marcus, but that's impossible. Marcus died 4 years ago in a car accident." My mouth went dry. "Are you sure? Maybe someone at the wedding looked similar. Can you send me the photos, please?" I selected 3 of the clearest shots and emailed them to her. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "Oh my God," Sarah was sobbing. "That's him. That's Marcus. The scar, his face, everything. But Maya, he's dead. I went to his funeral." "Sarah, I don't understand what's happening here. Please, you have to delete those photos, all of them. Marcus he wasn't a good person. He was obsessive, controlling. When I broke up with him, he threatened to hurt me. The night he died, he was driving to my apartment. The police said he was going 90 miles an hour. "I'll delete them right now," I said. But when I tried to delete the photos, something was wrong. I selected all 31 photos and hit delete, but when I checked my trash folder, it was empty. The photos weren't there. I went back to my main photo library. 878 photos, 31 more than I'd uploaded. The new photos were all of me. Me eating breakfast this morning. Me brushing my teeth. Me sleeping in my bed last night. But I hadn't set up any cameras in my apartment. All my equipment was in my camera bag. I scrolled to the last new photo and my blood went cold. It was a close-up of my face, taken from just inches away. I was looking at my laptop screen, taken just moments ago. In the reflection in my eyes, I could see someone standing behind me. I spun around. My apartment was empty. I called Sarah back, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried the maid of honor, Jessica. Maya? Jessica answered, but she was crying. Jessica, is everything okay? It's Claire. Maya, Claire is dead. Her body was found yesterday morning. What? That's impossible. I saw Claire at the wedding last night. Maya, Claire was murdered 3 days ago. They found her in her apartment. The police think it was a suicide, but there are things that don't make sense. I pulled up the wedding photos and found the ones with Claire. In the early photos, she looked normal, maybe a little tired, but as I scrolled through the night, her skin got grayer, her eyes more sunken. In the last photo, her face was partially decomposed, but she was still wearing the bridesmaid dress, still standing with the group. Jessica, how did Claire die? She took pills. But Maya, she left this note about Marcus, about how it was her fault he died. She was driving the night of the accident. She was the one who called and told him Sarah wanted to see him. She felt responsible for his death. I looked closer at the photos. In every single photo with Marcus, Claire was looking at him. Even when everyone else was looking at the camera or at each other, Claire was staring at Marcus. Jessica, I need to know something. What was Claire's relationship with Marcus? They were friends in college. After Sarah broke up with Marcus, he started calling Claire, asking her to help him get Sarah back. The night he died, he called Claire and begged her to tell Sarah he needed to see her. Claire called Sarah and lied, said it was an emergency. That's why Marcus was driving to Sarah's apartment when he crashed. I hung up and searched for more information online. I found Marcus's obituary, then Claire's. Then I found Claire's Instagram account. Her last post was from 4 days ago. I can't do this anymore. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I'm coming. That's when I understood. My camera hadn't captured Marcus haunting Sarah. It had captured him coming for Claire. And Claire, whatever I photographed at that wedding, it wasn't really Claire. It was something else wearing her face, showing up for one last bridesmaid duty. My laptop made a sound. A new photo had appeared. It was my reflection in my dark laptop screen, and behind me, barely visible, were two figures standing in my apartment. I never opened that photo. I quit wedding photography the next day, went back to the coffee shop full-time. I keep my laptop camera covered with tape now, but sometimes my phone takes photos by itself. Photos of empty rooms that don't look empty. Photos of mirrors that show reflections of people who aren't there. I'm too afraid to look at what they show. But sometimes, late at night, I can hear my camera turning on by itself in the other room, the mechanical click of the shutter taking pictures of something I never want to see. My name is Derek Martinez, and I've been a real estate agent for 12 years. I got my license right out of college thinking I'd make easy money showing houses to rich people. Turns out, real estate is mostly rejection, long hours, and praying your deals don't fall through at the last minute. I've sold everything from starter homes to million-dollar ranches, worked through the 2008 crash when nobody was buying anything, and learned to smile while clients treated me like their personal servant. But what happened last month near Antelope, Oregon, changed everything I thought I knew about property sales. Sometimes the best commission isn't worth what you find. I was having the worst year of my career. 3 deals had fallen through in 2 months, my car payment was overdue, and my wife Sarah was making comments about maybe I should look for a real job. I was sitting in my office on a Tuesday morning, staring at my empty calendar, when my phone rang. Derek? This is Jim Patterson from Cascade Realty up in Portland. I knew Jim by reputation. Big firm, expensive listings, the kind of agent who drove a Tesla and wore $1,000 suits. I've got a situation, Jim said. Client wants to buy a property sight unseen. 64 acres near Antelope for $200,000. Cash deal, no inspection, quick close. My calculator was already running. Standard 6% commission meant $12,000, more money than I'd made in the last 3 months combined. What's the catch? I asked. No catch. Property's been sitting empty for decades. Clients from overseas, some kind of investment thing. He just needs photos and basic documentation. You interested? I was desperate enough to drive anywhere for 12 grand. Send me the details. 20 minutes later, the listing hit my email. 64 acres of rural land, main house, several outbuildings, well water, power lines already run to the property. The photos were old and grainy, but it looked like a decent spread. What made my stomach drop was the price. I'd sold similar properties in that area for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. This was listed at $200,000. I called the listing agent. Linda, Derek Martinez down in Bend. I'm looking at your Antelope property. This price right? Oh, that old commune thing? Yeah, we've had it listed for 3 years. Owner's estate wants it gone. Some religious group built it back in the 80s, then everything went to hell. Been empty ever since. Commune. That word made me pause, but $12,000 made me keep talking. My client wants to close next week. I can drive up Thursday, get photos, do the paperwork. Perfect. Property's about 15 miles east of Antelope, end of Muddy Creek Road. Can't miss it. I hung up and immediately Googled Commune, Antelope, Oregon. What I found made my commission dreams a little darker. Rajneesh Puram. In the 1980s, a religious cult had basically taken over the entire area. Thousands of followers, armed security, bioterror attacks on the local town. The FBI had raided the place in 1985, arrested the leaders, and everyone scattered. The property had been abandoned ever since. But $12,000 is $12,000. I booked a hotel in the Dalles and started the 3-hour drive Thursday morning. Muddy Creek Road was exactly that. Muddy and barely a road. My Honda Civic bounced through potholes for 20 minutes before I saw the entrance. 2 rusted metal posts held up a faded sign that used to say something I couldn't read anymore. Beyond that, a dirt road disappeared into scrub brush and juniper trees. I drove slowly, taking photos with my phone for the listing. The landscape was high desert, all sagebrush and rocks under a gray October sky. My GPS had lost Ignal 10 minutes ago, but there was only one road to follow. That's when I saw the buildings. The main structure was huge, maybe 10,000 square feet, built like a warehouse with faded, red metal siding. Around it, smaller buildings were scattered across the property like someone had thrown them there. Most were obviously abandoned. Broken windows, caved-in roofs, doors hanging open. But as I got closer, I noticed something that made me slow down. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Recent ones from something bigger than my car. I parked near the main building and grabbed my camera. The place was supposed to be empty, had been empty for 40 years, but those tracks were maybe a week old. I followed them with my eyes. They led from the main road to the largest building, then looped around to 3 smaller structures before heading back out. The main building's front door was chained shut, but the chain was new. Bright silver links that hadn't been weathered by 40 Oregon winters. I took photos of everything, the building, the chain, the tire tracks. My client might be buying sight unseen, but I was going to document what I found. I walked around to a side door. This one was unlocked. Inside, the smell hit me immediately. Industrial cleaner, so strong it made my eyes water. Not the musty animal den smell you'd expect from a building that had been empty since 1985. This smelled like someone had bleached every surface in the last week. My footsteps echoed in the main hall. It was enormous, with a concrete floor and metal rafters 20 feet overhead. Stage at one end, probably where they held their religious meetings. But what caught my attention were the footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. Boot prints, size 10 or 11, leading from the door I'd entered to a staircase at the back of the room. And something else. Drag marks, like someone had pulled something heavy across the floor. I followed the prints to the stairs. They led down to a basement door that was locked with a new padlock. Not rusted, not old, new. Brass-colored and still shiny. I tried calling. G, the listing agent. No signal. Tried calling my office. Nothing. But my phone still had battery, so I kept taking photos. Back outside, I walked the property. 6 other buildings, and 3 of them showed obvious signs of recent use. Fresh tire tracks led to all 3. The first building looked like it used to be dormitories. Rows of small rooms, most with the doors ripped off. but the windows had been covered from the inside with black plastic, and I could see light leaking around the edges. The second building was locked up tight, but I could hear a humming sound coming from inside. Electrical humming, like generators or refrigeration units. The third building had an unlocked side door. I should have left then. Should have gotten in my car and driven back to Bend and told my client the property wasn't suitable. But $12,000 is $12,000, and I was already 3 hours from home. Inside the third building, my hands started shaking. Medical equipment. Examination tables with stirrups, like at a gynecologist's office. Heart monitors. IV stands. A refrigeration unit humming in the corner, the kind they use in hospitals for blood storage. And all of it looked new, or at least maintained. This wasn't abandoned. This was active. I took photos of everything, my phone camera clicking over and over. On one of the examination tables, there was a clipboard with papers. I picked it up. Intake forms. Names, ages, addresses. But not American addresses. Places in Thailand, Guatemala, Honduras. Each form had passport numbers, medical information, blood type. And at the bottom of each form, someone had written a dollar amount in red ink. $50,000, $75,000, $125,000. I kept flipping through the papers. 23 forms total, all dated within the last 6 months, all with blood types circled and dollar amounts written. That's when I heard the engine. A truce. Keek, maybe 2 trucks, coming up the road from the highway. I stuffed the clipboard back where I found it and looked around for somewhere to hide. There was a supply closet near the back of the building. I squeezed inside and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The trucks stopped outside. Doors slammed. 2 men came into the building, speaking English, but with accents I couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe Russian. Friday shipment confirmed, one of them said. 3 matches. Seattle clients pay extra for the boy's kidney, the other replied. Double rate. My blood went cold. I was hiding in a supply closet listening to people discuss selling human organs like they were car parts. The men walked past my closet toward another room. I heard drilling, construction sounds, like they were building something or modifying the medical equipment. I knew I should run, get to my car and drive straight to the police. But my phone was almost dead, down to 8% battery, and I needed photos as evidence. Nobody would believe this without proof. I eased the closet door open and stepped out. The men were in the other room, their voices echoing off the walls. I moved quickly, taking photos of the intake forms, the medical equipment, everything I could see. That's when my phone buzzed with a low battery warning. The sound wasn't loud, but in that silent building, it might as well have been a fire alarm. The drilling stopped. Footsteps headed my direction. I shoved my phone in my pocket and ducked back toward the closet, but I was too late. One of the men rounded the corner and saw me standing there with my camera out. "Hey!" he shouted in accented English. "Who are you?" I ran, burst out of the building toward my car, my keys already in my hand. Behind me, both men were yelling, but not in English anymore. Some language I'd never heard. I reached my Honda and fumbled with the key fob. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys in the dirt. As I bent to pick them up, a third man appeared from behind another building, walking straight toward me. I left the keys and ran into the scrub brush toward the tree line about 100 yards away. Behind me, I heard ATVs starting up. They were going to hunt me down like an animal. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, through sagebrush that tore at my clothes, over rocks that twisted my ankles, into the juniper forest as fast as my real estate agent legs could carry me. The ATV engines were getting closer. 20 minutes of running and my lungs felt like they were going to explode. I could hear the ATVs moving through the trees, the riders calling to each other on radios. They were coordinating, trying to box me in. I found an old irrigation ditch from when this place was farmland, before the commune took over, dropped into it, and covered myself with dead brush and tumbleweeds. The ditch was maybe 3 feet deep, just enough to hide if I stayed flat. An ATV passed within 10 feet of me. I could smell the exhaust, hear the rider talking into his radio in that foreign language. I held my breath and didn't move a muscle. For 6 hours I stayed in that ditch, until well after dark, until the sounds of engines and voices faded completely. My phone had died sometime in the afternoon. I was alone in the Oregon desert with no idea which direction led to safety. When I finally crawled out, every muscle in my body was cramped. I picked a direction that I hoped was west and started walking. 4 hours later, stumbling through the darkness, I saw headlights on what had to be Highway 97. A semi-truck driver named Pete picked me up. I was covered in dirt and scratches, babbling about organ trafficking and cult properties. He probably thought I was on drugs, but he drove me to the Oregon State Police office, in the Dalles anyway. The state troopers called the FBI when I showed them the photos on my phone. Federal agents interviewed me for 6 hours, had me identify the location on a map, then told me to go home and wait for contact. 3 days later, they raided the property. According to the news reports, they found 4 people locked in the basement of the main building. All were immigrants who'd been promised jobs in America, then had their passports taken and were being held for medical procedures. The FBI arrested 7 people on site, but they told me privately that at least 3 had escaped, including whoever was running the operation. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A week after the raid, I got a text message. No words, just a photo. My 8-year-old daughter Emma getting off the school bus taken from across the street. I could see the timestamp, that morning 45 minutes earlier. We moved into a witness protection program that weekend. New names, new city, new life. My marriage didn't survive the stress of relocation and constant fear. Sarah took Emma and moved in with her sister in Florida. I haven't seen my daughter in 8 months. I'm not Derek Martinez anymore. I don't sell real estate anymore. I work in a warehouse now, loading trucks under a name that isn't mine. Sometimes my phone rings, and when I answer, nobody speaks, just breathing on the other end of the line. I know the 3 who escaped are still out there, still running their operation somewhere else with new properties and new victims. And I know they remember the real estate agent who cost them millions of dollars and 4 victims. I'll never stop looking over my shoulder. And I'll never stop wondering if they're still looking for me, still waiting for the right moment to finish what they started. The commission on that property would have been $12,000. It cost me everything I had instead. My name is James Mitchell, and I've been working maintenance and janitorial jobs for 18 years. Started right out of high school, cleaning office buildings downtown, then moved up to facility management at a few different places. I've cleaned hospitals, schools, government buildings, you name it. I've seen some weird stuff over the years, especially working nights. People leave behind strange things, and empty buildings can feel pretty creepy when you're alone. But I always figured it was just my imagination, you know? Late night shifts mess with your head sometimes. But what happened last summer at Crater Lake changed everything I thought I knew about working alone at night. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghost stories or supernatural stuff. I deal with facts, broken toilets, dirty floors, burnt-out light bulbs, real problems with real solutions. Or at least, that's what I used to think. The divorce papers came through in May, and along with them, a pretty hefty alimony payment I couldn't afford on my regular day shift salary. My buddy Rick told me about this summer job up at Crater Lake National Park, night shift janitor, cleaning the ranger stations and visitor facilities around the park. The pay was almost double what I was making, and they needed someone to start right away. I figured, how hard could it be? I'd done plenty of overnight cleaning jobs before. Plus, I'd get to spend my summer in one of the most beautiful places in Oregon instead of stuck in some stuffy office building. The job was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. Clean the visitor centers, ranger stations, restrooms, and maintenance buildings scattered around the park. They gave me a pickup truck with all my supplies and a detailed route to follow each night. The ranger who trained me was named Lisa Thompson. She'd been working at Crater Lake for about 15 years, knew Eve, Rye Trail, and every building in the park. Real professional type, maybe in her 40s. Always had her radio clipped to her belt and wore her uniform like she meant business. But when she was showing me the route on my first day, something about her seemed nervous. We drove around in the late afternoon, and she pointed out each stop on my nightly circuit. The main visitor center, 3 smaller ranger stations, the maintenance facility, and about a dozen restroom buildings scattered along the rim drive and hiking trails. Everything seemed pretty straightforward, standard cleaning stuff, nothing I hadn't done before. But when we got to the part of the route that went along the lakeshore, Lisa got quiet for a minute. Then she turned to me and said, "James, I need to tell you something important about working nights here." I figured she was going to give me the usual speech about bears or staying hydrated at altitude, but instead, she looked me right in the eye and said, "If you hear singing at night while you're working, get back to your truck immediately. Lock the doors and don't come out until it stops." I laughed a little, thinking she was messing with me. "Singing? Like other employees?" "No," she said, real serious. "Not employees. And if you see someone walking around the lake at night, especially a woman in a long dress, don't approach her. Don't call out to her, just get in your truck and drive to the next stop on your route." I thought she was hazing the new guy, you know? Every job has those weird traditions where they try to scare the rookie. So I nodded and said, sure, I'd watch out for the mysterious singing lady. Lisa didn't seem to think it was funny. "I'm serious, James. I've been here 15 years and I've seen what happens to people who don't listen to that advice." The first week went exactly like I expected. I'd show up at 10 p.m., check in with the evening ranger, and start my route. The park at night was incredibly peaceful. No crowds, no traffic, just me and the stars and that massive lake reflecting the moonlight. I'd never seen anything like it. The air was clean and cool, and you could see more stars than I ever knew existed. I got into a rhythm pretty quick. Start at the main visitor center, work my way around the rim drive, hitting all the restrooms and smaller buildings, then finish up at the maintenance facility around 5 a.m. I'd eat my lunch break sitting on the tailgate of my truck, looking out over the lake. It was the best job I'd ever had. My radio would crackle occasionally with check-ins from the night security patrol, but mostly it was just me and the silence. I started to think I'd really lucked out with this gig. Good pay, beautiful scenery, and nobody looking over my shoulder all night. On the 8th night, everything changed. I was cleaning the restrooms near the Rim Village area, maybe around 2 a.m. It was a clear night, no wind, just dead quiet except for the sound of my vacuum cleaner. I was finishing up, getting ready to load my equipment back in the truck when I heard it. Singing. A woman's voice, somewhere out in the darkness beyond the parking area. It was beautiful, really beautiful, like nothing I'd ever heard before. But it was also weird because it seemed to echo off the water in a way that made it sound like it was coming from everywhere at once. Like surround sound, but natural. I remembered what Lisa had told me, but honestly it sounded so lovely that I couldn't imagine why anyone would be afraid of it. Maybe it was just someone camping who couldn't sleep, or a park employee I hadn't met yet. The singing continued for maybe 5 minutes, this haunting melody that I couldn't quite make out the words to. It was drawing me toward the lake shore, and before I really thought about it, I found myself walking away from my truck toward the sound. I made it maybe 50 feet down the path toward the water when the singing stopped. Just cut off mid-note, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence that followed was so complete it made my ears ring. And that's when I felt it, the sensation of being watched. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you from across a room? It was like that, but stronger. Like something was studying me from the darkness. I looked around but couldn't see anything. The moonlight lit up the lake pretty well, but the shore areas were all deep shadows. My skin was crawling and I realized I was standing out there completely alone, probably a quarter mile from my truck, with no idea what was watching me. I backed up slowly toward the parking area, trying not to make any sudden movements. Whatever was out there, I didn't want to provoke it. By the time I got back to my truck, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. I drove straight to the next stop on my route and tried to convince myself it was just nerves. New job, working alone, late night. All that stuff can mess with your head. But deep down, I knew Lisa hadn't been joking around. The next night, I was determined to act normal and professional. I had work to do, and I wasn't going to let some weird coincidence freak me out. I started my route like usual, but I made sure to keep my radio volume up and my truck keys in my hand whenever I was outside. Everything went fine until I got to the Mazama village area around 1:30 a.m. I was cleaning the visitor information building when the singing started again. This time it was closer. much closer. And when I looked out the window, I could see someone standing down by the lake shore. It was a woman in a long, dark dress. She was maybe 200 feet away, just standing at the water's edge. The singing was definitely coming from her direction, but it still had that weird echo quality, like the sound was bouncing around inside my head. My training kicked in. I'd worked security jobs before, and if someone was in the park after hours, I should probably check on them, make sure they weren't lost or hurt. So I walked outside and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman turned toward me, and that's when I realized something was very wrong. She was tall. Not just tall, she was huge. 7 feet at least, maybe more. And the way she moved when she turned around wasn't right. It was too smooth, like she was gliding instead of walking. The singing continued even though I could see her face now and her mouth wasn't moving. The sound was coming from her but not from her lips. It was like the air around her was singing. I took a step back and she started walking toward me. Not walking, gliding. Her feet didn't seem to be touching the ground quite right, and her dress moved like it was underwater even though there was no wind. That's when my nerve broke. I ran back to my truck, fumbling with my keys, and peeled out of there so fast I left tire marks on the asphalt. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but the worst part? The singing followed me. Even though I was driving away at 40 miles an hour, the sound stayed with me. It was coming through my radio speakers, even though the radio was turned off. I reached over and pulled the faceplate right off the radio, but the singing kept going. And then I realized it wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was inside my head. I drove straight to the main visitor center and sat in the well-lit parking lot until sunrise, trying to get that melody out of my brain. When my shift ended, I was exhausted and confused and scared in a way I'd never been before. Lisa was waiting for me when I got back to check out. She took one look at my face and asked, "Did she touch you?" "No," I said. I ran before she got close. Lisa actually looked relieved. "Then you're okay. Don't go near her again." "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. "What is that thing?" "Something that shouldn't be here anymore," Lisa said. "But she is. And she's not going anywhere." I thought about quitting right then, but the money was too good and I needed this job. So I told Lisa I'd be more careful, and she gave me some advice about staying in my truck if I heard the singing again. The next night I was cleaning the Phantom Ship Overlook building when I looked up and saw her standing on the roof. She was directly above me, looking down, and her neck was bent at an angle that should have broken it. Her head was tilted almost completely sideways like an owl, but worse. When she saw me looking up at her, she smiled. I've never seen anything smile like that. Her mouth opened way too wide, showing teeth that were too long and too sharp. And then she started climbing down the wall toward me. She moved like a spider, her arms and legs bending in directions that human joints don't bend. Her fingers were too long and they stuck to the building's siding like she had suction cups. I ran inside and locked the door, watching through the window as she finished climbing down. When she reached the ground, she walked over to the window and pressed her face right against the glass. Her eyes were completely white. No pupils, no iris, just solid white, like cataracts. But I could tell she was looking right at me. And when she opened her mouth, the singing poured out so loud, it made the windows vibrate. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound went right through my hands, right through my skull, and filled up my brain until I couldn't think about anything else. It wasn't just music anymore. It was like she was trying to pull something out of me, or put something into me. For 3 hours, she stood at that window and sang while I sat on the floor with my hands over my ears, crying like a little kid. When the sun finally came up, she was just gone. No sound of her leaving, no footprints in the dirt. But the window where her face had been was covered in long scratches like fingernails dragged across the glass. I quit that morning, told Lisa I couldn't do it anymore, and she just nodded like she'd been expecting it. "You lasted longer than most," she said. 3 weeks is good." "How many people have seen her?" I asked. "Everyone who works nights. Some handle it better than others." "What does she want?" Lisa looked tired and old suddenly. "We don't know. She's been here since before this was a park. The local tribes have stories about her going back hundreds of years. I went home to Portland, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that singing echoing in my memory. I researched everything I could find about Crater Lake, looking for some explanation. The indigenous stories Lisa mentioned were all over the place if you knew where to look. They called her different names, but the description was always the same. Something that wore a woman's shape, but was hungry for something humans had. They said she lived in the deep water and came out at night to hunt. A week after I quit, I saw a missing person poster in a coffee shop. A young guy named David Chen, 23 years old, had disappeared while hiking at Crater Lake. According to witnesses, he'd been seen walking toward the lake at night, following someone singing. They never found his body. I drove back to the park and found Lisa at the ranger station. I showed her the poster, and she looked like she'd aged 10 years. "There's nothing we can do," she said. "She calls, and some people answer. Why don't you warn people? Put up signs or something." "We do warn them. They think it's just a legend." "Would you have believed me before you saw her?" She was right. I wouldn't have believed any of it. I moved to a new apartment in southeast Portland and tried to forget about Crater Lake. But sometimes I wake up at 2 a.m. hearing that singing in the distance. And sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth or washing dishes, I catch a glimpse of something tall in my bathroom mirror standing behind me. When I turn around, there's nothing there. But the singing starts up again, faint but getting closer. I've been researching those old tribal stories more, and I found something that made my blood run cold. Lisa lied to me about one thing. The woman isn't trapped at Crater Lake. The stories say she can follow people who've heard her song, that she marks them somehow. Because 3 months ago I was getting ready for bed when I saw her reflection in my bedroom window. She was standing on the fire escape outside my third-floor apartment, her white eyes staring right at me through the glass. I know one night I'll turn around and she'll be real, not just a reflection. And when that happens, I won't be able to run anymore. If you ever visit Crater Lake and you hear singing at night, don't go toward it. Don't listen to how beautiful it sounds. Just get in your car and drive away as fast as you can. Because once she's seen you, once you've heard her song, she never really lets you go. My name is Alicia Martinez, and I've been working as a grocery store cashier for 8 years. I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you're scanning barcodes and dealing with customers 40 hours a week, you learn to notice details. You pick up on when something's not right, when prices don't match, when people are lying about returns, when the milk's gone bad before the expiration date. I've got good instincts about things being off, but what happened in my southeast Portland apartment last summer made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. I'd been saving for my own place since I was 24. Living with roommates, crashing on couches, staying in my mom's basement, anything to put away $50 or $100 each month. Working at Morrison's Market doesn't pay much, but I'm good with money. I clip coupons, buy generic brands, never eat out. By my 32nd birthday, I finally had enough for first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. The apartment I found was perfect for my budget. A studio in southeast Portland, just renovated. Beautiful hardwood floors, fresh white paint on every wall, updated bathroom fixtures. The listing said $600 a month, which was incredible for that area. Most studios were going for $800 or $900. When I called the number, the landlord, Mr. Chen, seemed eager to show it right away. We met at the building on a Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Chen was probably 60, dressed in a nice suit, driving a BMW. He seemed successful, professional. The building was older, probably from the 1960s, but well maintained. My studio was on the second floor, Unit 2B. The moment he unlocked the door, I fell in love with it. The space was small but efficient. Everything was brand new. The paint smell was still fresh. The hardwood floors gleamed under the overhead light. There was a decent-sized closet near the back corner, a kitchenette with new appliances, and 2 big windows facing east. I could picture myself there immediately. "How soon can I move in?" I asked. Mr. Chen smiled. "This weekend if you want." I just need first month, last month, and deposit. I was surprised he didn't ask for references or run a credit check, but I wasn't complaining. I handed him the cash that same day. $1,800, every penny I'd saved. Moving day was that Saturday. I didn't have much stuff, just clothes, some books, a small TV, and a mattress. My sister Maya helped me carry everything up the stairs. We spent the afternoon arranging furniture and hanging up my clothes in the closet. "This place is really nice, Alicia," Maya said, looking around. "You did good." That first week was perfect. The building was quiet, mostly working professionals. My neighbors nodded hello in the hallway. I could walk to work in 20 minutes. At night, I'd lie on my mattress looking up at the ceiling, feeling proud of myself. Finally, my own space. On the 9th day, I remember exactly because I was counting, I noticed a smell. I was getting dressed for work, grabbing a shirt from the closet, when I caught a whiff of something strange. It was faint, organic, like old meat left in the fridge too long or vegetables rotting in the garbage disposal. I stuck my head into the closet and sniffed around. The smell was definitely stronger in there, but I couldn't find a source. I checked behind my hanging clothes, looked up at the ceiling, even got down on my knees and smelled the floor. Nothing obvious. I figured it was probably the dumpster outside. The windows faced the alley where they kept the trash. By day 12, the smell was worse. Much worse. When I opened the closet door that morning, the stench hit me like a wall. I gagged and had to step back. It smelled like dead now, like something had crawled in there and died. I called Maya. "Do you remember smelling anything weird when you helped me move in?" "No," she said. "Why?" "There's this smell in my closet. It's getting really bad. Maybe a mouse died in the walls?" That made sense. Old building, small spaces between walls where animals could get trapped. I went to the hardware store and bought every air freshener they had. Plug-ins, sprays, those little trees you hang up. I opened all the windows, even though it was cold outside. The air fresheners helped a little, but they couldn't cover it completely. It was like putting perfume on a corpse. Maya came over the following weekend to visit. The moment she walked through the door, she stopped. "What's that smell?" she asked, not even taking off her shoes. My stomach dropped. "You smell it too?" "Yeah, it's really bad." "What is that?" I called Mr. Chen that Monday. He sounded annoyed when I explained the problem. "I'll send someone over," he said. "Probably just old building smells." The maintenance man came that Wednesday. His name was Eddie, and he seemed to know what he was doing. He opened up sections of the wall in the closet, checked all the plumbing, inspected the ceiling for water damage. He spent 3 hours in my apartment poking around with a flashlight. "I don't see anything," he told me. "No dead animals, no water damage, no mold. Sometimes old buildings just smell funny. Try more air fresheners." But the smell kept getting worse. Every single day, it got stronger. By the 3rd week, I was sleeping with a towel over my face. I'd hold my breath when I opened the closet door. Getting dressed became this awful ritual where I'd grab clothes as fast as possible and slam the door shut. The worst part was how the smell seemed to follow me. My clothes absorbed it, even after washing them twice. At work, my coworker Janet started making comments. "Did you change your detergent?" she asked one day. "Why?" "You smell different. Not bad, just strange." I was horrified. I called Mr. Chen again, more desperate and rate this time. "Either you fix this or I'm breaking my lease," I told him. "Now hold on," he said. "Let's not be hasty. Maybe we need to try a different approach." "What kind of approach?" There was a long pause. "I should probably tell you something about the previous tenant." My blood went cold. "What about him?" "He passed away in the apartment. But it was natural causes, and I had the whole place renovated. New paint, new floors, everything. There's no reason for any smell." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't tell me someone died in here?" "I'm not legally required to disclose that in Oregon unless you ask specifically." "That's disgusting. How could you not tell me?" "Look, I'll bring in a professional cleaning crew. They'll figure out what's causing the smell. The cleaning crew arrived the next day. 2 guys in hazmat suits with UV lights and chemical detection equipment. They looked like something from a science fiction movie. They spent 6 hours going over every inch of my apartment. What they found made me sick. "Ma'am," the lead guy said, pulling off his mask, "we found traces of decomposition fluid that soaked through the floorboards into the concrete foundation underneath." "What does that mean?" "Someone died here and wasn't found for a while. In summer heat, a human body decomposes rapidly. The fluids soak into whatever's below: wood, concrete, carpet padding. When we renovated, we only replaced the surface materials. The contamination went deeper." I felt like I might throw up. "How much deeper?" "Deep enough that it's rising through microscopic cracks in your new hardwood floor. That's what you're smelling." "Can you fix it?" The second guy shook his head. "We'd have to tear out all the flooring and seal the concrete with special chemicals. It's about a $15,000 job." I called Mr. Chen immediately. When I told it, and what the cleaning crew found, he went quiet for a long time. "15,000? He finally said. "That's ridiculous. You're exaggerating the smell. I've been in that apartment plenty of times and never noticed anything." "Then you come sleep here for a week and see how you feel." "I'm not paying $15,000 because you're sensitive to smells." That night I broke my lease. I packed everything I owned into garbage bags and moved back to Maya's couch. I lost my deposit, my first month's rent, everything. But I couldn't spend another night in that place. The strange thing was, even on Maya's couch, I could still smell it, faint, but definitely there. I'd wake up in the middle of the night gagging, but when I asked Maya about it, she said the couch smelled fine. "Maybe it's in your head now," she suggested, "like trauma or something." But I knew what I was smelling. It was the same exact smell from the apartment. I became obsessed with learning about the previous tenant. I spent hours online searching through obituaries and news articles. Finally, I found him. Michael Torres, 26 years old, graduate student in philosophy at Portland State University. He died of a heart attack during a heat wave in July. His body wasn't discovered for 3 weeks. Michael had a blog where he wrote about his research. Most of it was boring academic stuff, but his final post, written the day before he died, made my skin crawl. "Consciousness doesn't end at the body," he'd written. "Our experiences stain physical reality. Every intense emotion, every moment of pain or fear, leaves a mark on the molecules around us. I'm going to prove it." I dug deeper into his academic work. Michael had been writing his thesis on something called experiential residue in physical spaces. His theory was that intense experiences literally change the molecular structure of a location, that consciousness could imprint itself on matter. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Michael had planned his death. He'd chosen the hottest week of summer. He'd disconnected his phone, told his friends he was going out of town. He'd created the perfect conditions for maximum decomposition. I contacted the other people who'd rented the apartment after Michael. It took some detective work, but I found 4 of them. Every single one had left within 2 weeks. Every single one complained about the smell. A woman named Sarah told me the smell gave her constant nosebleeds. I thought it was allergies at first, but the nosebleeds stopped the day I moved out. Another tenant, a guy named David, said something that really scared me. The weirdest part was that I started smelling it in my next apartment too. Just sometimes, usually when I was stressed or anxious. That's when I realized what was happening to me. The smell wasn't just in my head. It was following me, spreading, like some kind of invisible contamination. I went to a doctor who specialized in smell disorders. He ran a bunch of tests and told me I had developed partial anosmia, meaning I could no longer smell most things normally, but I could still smell the apartment. The phantom scent would hit me randomly, usually when I was scared or stressed. "It's likely psychosomatic," the doctor said. "Trauma can rewire how your brain processes smell." But I knew the truth. Michael had succeeded in his experiment. He'd proven that consciousness could stain the physical world, and somehow I'd become part of his proof. I reported Mr. Chen to the housing authority. With testimony from all the previous tenants, they condemned the apartment and filed charges against him for not disclosing the death. But that didn't help me. The damage was already done. I moved to Seattle, got a job at a different grocery store, tried to start over. For months, everything seemed normal. I thought maybe I'd left it behind. Then one morning last week, I woke up and smelled it, strong and unmistakable for about 10 seconds in my new bedroom. I lay there in the dark, wondering if Michael really had proven his theory, if consciousness could stain the world, if I'd carried his experiment with me somehow. My therapist calls it trauma, but I know better. Some stains spread, some experiments never end, and Michael is still proving his point through me. I'm terrified I might be spreading it further, that maybe I've become part of his proof. I still work as a cashier, still notice when things are off. But now I know that some things that are off can follow you home, can get inside you, can change you into something you never wanted to be. And late at night, when I smell that smell again, I wonder if I'll carry this invisible contamination until I die. Or if maybe, God help me, I'll become part of spreading Michael's proof to someone else. Because that's the thing about consciousness staining reality. Once it starts, where does it end? My name is Carmen Rodriguez, and I've been a registered nurse for 8 years. I work the night shift at Oregon Health Science University Hospital in Portland. It's tough work. 12-hour shifts from 7 at night until 7 in the morning, dealing with everything from heart attacks to car crashes to people who waited too long to get help. I chose nursing because I wanted to help people. My mom was sick a lot when I was growing up, and the nurses who took care of her were like angels. They made her laugh even when she was in pain. I wanted to be that person for someone else's family. Most nights, I handle whatever comes through those doors. I've seen people take their last breath. I've helped deliver babies. I've held the hand of a scared kid getting stitches while their parents filled out paperwork. After 8 years, I thought I'd seen everything the world could throw at me. But what happened on Highway 84 in late October changed everything I thought I knew about life and death. Some people say nurses see too much, that we get used to things normal people can't handle. Maybe that's true. But what I picked up on that dark highway wasn't something any amount of training could have prepared me for. And now I know that sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who can't be helped at all. I live in Hood River, about an hour east of Portland along the Columbia River. The drive home takes me on Highway 84, which follows the river through the Columbia River Gorge. It's beautiful during the day, waterfalls, cliffs, and the river flowing beside you. But at 2 in the morning after a long shift, it's just a dark road that gets me home. I make this drive twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday after my shifts. I've been doing it for 3 years now, ever since I moved to Hood River to get away from the city. The drive is actually nice at that hour. No TR, epic, no stress. Just me, my car, and the empty highway. It gives me time to decompress from whatever I've seen at the hospital. The routine never changes. I clock out at 7, grab a coffee from the vending machine, and head to the parking garage. My Honda Civic is reliable. Not fancy, but it gets me home safe. I keep a travel mug, some granola bars, and a first aid kit in the car. Old habits from nursing school. Highway 84 at night is mostly empty. You might see a few trucks, maybe someone else getting off a late shift. The road follows the Columbia River, winding through the gorge with steep cliffs on one side and the water on the other. There are guardrails, but some sections make you nervous, especially when it's raining. That Thursday in late October started like any other shift. We had 3 admissions, 2 discharges, and 1 patient who coded twice but pulled through. But we also lost someone, an elderly man who came in with chest pain. His family was driving down from Seattle and didn't make it in time. I was with him when he passed. He kept asking for his daughter, kept saying he had to tell her something important. Deaths hit different when the family isn't there. You feel like you failed somehow, even when you know you did everything right. This one stayed with me as I walked to my car. The man's daughter called just as he died, and I had to tell her over the phone that her father was gone. She cried and said she was only an hour away. It was raining when I left the hospital. Not hard, but steady. The kind of rain that makes everything slick and cuts your visibility. I turned on the radio for company and pulled onto Highway 84. The clock on my dashboard read 2:15 a.m. The first 20 minutes of the drive were normal. I passed a few trucks and one other car, probably another night shift worker heading home. The radio was playing classic rock, and I was thinking about the patient we'd lost. His daughter's voice kept replaying in my head. Just past the Cascade Locks exit, about 30 miles from Portland, I saw something that made me slow down. There was a person standing on the shoulder of the highway, waving their arms. A woman, it looked like, wearing what seemed to be a white or light-colored shirt. My first thought was car trouble. Maybe she'd broken down and needed help. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. There was no car anywhere, no hazard lights, no visible reason why someone would be standing alone on the highway at 2:30 in the morning. The woman was soaking wet. Her hair hung down in dark strings, and her clothes were plastered to her body. She was waving frantically, the kind of desperate gestures you see from people in real trouble. Every instinct I had as a nurse kicked in. Someone needed help. It didn't matter that it was the middle of the night or that I was alone. That's what you do. You help people. I'd stopped for accidents before, used my nursing skills to help until paramedics arrived. It comes with the job. I pulled over about 20 feet past where she was standing and put on my hazard lights. In my rearview mirror, I watched her walk toward my car. She moved slowly, carefully, like she was hurt or in shock. I rolled down the passenger window as she approached. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She nodded quickly and opened the passenger door. "Thank you," she said as she got in. "Thank you so much. I didn't think anyone would stop." The woman looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s, Asian, with long black hair that was completely soaked. Her clothes, jeans and a white blouse, were dripping wet. Water immediately started pooling on my car's floor mat. "What happened? Where's your car?" I asked, cranking up the heat and reaching into the back seat for the emergency blanket I keep there. "It went off the road," she said, her voice shaky. "About a mile back. I've been walking." I handed her the blanket. "Are you hurt? Do you need to go to the hose?" "Pital? I'm a nurse, I can check you over." She wrapped the blanket around herself but kept shivering. "No hospital," she said quickly. Just up the road. I need to get up the road." "Okay," I said, putting the car in drive. "What's your name?" "I'm Carmen." "Amy," she said, staring straight ahead through the windshield. "My name is Amy." I pulled back onto the highway and kept driving east. Amy sat quietly beside me, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. I glanced over at her every few seconds, using my nursing assessment skills to check for signs of injury or shock. "Are you sure you're not hurt?" I asked. Sometimes after an accident, people don't realize they're injured. Adrenaline masks the pain. Amy didn't answer. She just kept staring ahead, barely blinking. I figured she was in shock. It would explain the distant behavior and the way she wasn't really responding to questions. But something was bothering me. We'd been driving for about 5 minutes now, and Amy wasn't getting any warmer. The heat was cranked up. She had the blanket, but she was still dripping wet. Not just damp, actually dripping. Water was still pooling at her feet despite the heat blasting in the car. "Amy, where exactly do you need to go?" I asked. "What's your destination?" No response. She didn't even look at me. I tried again. "Do you have family nearby? Someone I can call?" Nothing. "Amy, you should really put on your seatbelt," I said, noticing she hadn't buckled in. Still nothing. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge that I'd spoken. It was like she couldn't hear me, or like she was somewhere else entirely. That's when I started to feel uneasy. In 8 years of nursing, I'd seen plenty of people in shock. But this was different. Amy wasn't just distant. She seemed almost vacant, like no one was home behind her eyes. I looked at her more carefully, using the skills I had learned for patient assessment. Her skin was pale, but not just pale. It was gray, like she was severely anemic or hypothermic. Her lips had a blue tint that reminded me of something I'd seen before but couldn't quite place. Then it hit me. That coloring, that exact shade of gray-blue. I'd seen it in the hospital. On patients who had been without oxygen for too long. On patients who didn't make it. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Amy, I really think we should get you to a hospital. You might have hypothermia. That's when she spoke again, still staring straight ahead. This is where I died. My heart jumped. What did you say? Right here, Amy said, her voice flat and emotionless. I couldn't see in the rain, just like tonight. I looked ahead and saw a section of guardrail that looked newer than the rest, like it had been recently repaired. There were still some flowers tied to it, the kind people leave at accident sites. October 15th, Amy continued. I was trying to get to my mother. She was dying. My mouth went dry. Amy, what year? What year did this happen? For the first time since getting in my car, Amy turned to look at me directly. Her eyes were clouded white, like cataracts, but she looked too young for that kind of eye disease. Does it matter? She asked. I never made it to her. Neither did she. I slammed on the brakes instinctively because there was a car stopped dead in my lane, right where the damaged guardrail was. No lights on, just sitting there in the dark. My car hydroplaned on the wet pavement. I felt the wheels lose traction as we started spinning. The steering wheel jerked in my hands as the car turned sideways, then backwards. I closed my eyes and braced for impact with either the stopped car or the guardrail. The car stopped with a jolt that threw me against my seatbelt. When I opened my eyes, we were facing backwards on the highway, just inches from the guardrail. I was hyperventilating, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I looked over at the passenger seat. Amy was gone. The seat was soaking. Wet where she'd been sitting, and there was still a puddle of water on the floor mat, but there was no sign of her anywhere. I fumbled for my seatbelt and got out of the car in the rain. I looked up and down the highway, checking both sides of the road. There was no stopped car, no other vehicle anywhere, just empty highway stretching in both directions. But the guardrail where Amy said she died, it was definitely damaged and recently repaired. I got back in my car and drove to the next exit, my hands still shaking. There was a 24-hour gas station just off the highway, and I pulled into the parking lot under the bright fluorescent lights. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, I went inside and asked the clerk if I could use their phone to call 911. I know how crazy I sounded, a nurse claiming she'd picked up a ghost on the highway, but I had to report it. What if there really was an accident? What if someone needed help? The state trooper who met me at the gas station was patient and professional. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes as I described Amy and what she'd told me. Can you give me the exact location where you think this accident happened? He asked. I described the section of highway with the repaired guardrail and the flowers. The trooper nodded and went back to his patrol car. I watched him use his computer for several minutes before returning with a printed report. Ma'am, I want you to look at this, he said, handing me the paper. It was an accident report dated October 15th, 1998. Amy Chen, age 28, single vehicle accident on Highway 84. Her car had gone through the guardrail during a rainstorm and rolled down into the Columbia River. She was found 3 days later when her car was pulled from the water. According to the report, Amy had been driving from Portland to a hospital in the D. Alice, where her mother was dying. She never made it. You're the 7th person to report picking her up this month, the trooper said quietly. I stared at the report, reading Amy's name, over and over. Is she trying to prevent accidents? Warn people? The trooper was quiet for a moment. Maybe, he said. Or maybe she just keeps trying to get to that hospital. Over and over. He looked at me seriously. I need to tell you something else. 4 of the people who picked her up died in car accidents within the next year. 3 walked away like you did. We don't know why some people survive and others don't. I drove home that night using Interstate 205 instead of Highway 84. I couldn't bring myself to take the scenic route along the river. When I got home, I sat in my kitchen until sunrise, researching everything I could find about Amy Chen and the other people who had picked her up. The 4 people who died later all crashed at different locations, on different roads, some in perfect weather conditions. There was no pattern except that they'd all given Amy a ride. I quit taking Highway 84 home from work. I added an hour to my commute, but I couldn't risk driving that road again. For a few weeks, I thought I was safe, that I'd escaped whatever Amy was doing to the people who helped her. But then I started seeing her in my rearview mirror. The first time, I was driving home on the interstate when I glanced in my mirror and saw someone sitting in my back seat. A wet figure in white, just sitting there silently. When I jerked around to look, the seat was empty. When I looked back in the mirror, she was gone. It's happened 6 more times since then. Always in the mirror, always disappearing when I turn around. Sometimes I can smell river water in my car afterwards. I don't know if Amy is trying to protect me or if I'm just next on her list. Maybe she marks people somehow and then we're part of whatever cycle she's stuck in. Maybe my hypervigilance, checking my mirrors constantly, driving slower, never taking risks, is what's keeping me alive. Or maybe Amy is just taking her time with me. I still work at the hospital. I still help people who need it. But I've learned that sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who died trying to help someone else. And sometimes, no matter how much you want to help, there are some people you can't save, including yourself. I don't drive alone at night anymore if I can help it. And I never, ever pick up hitchhikers. Because I know that Amy Chen is still out there, still trying to get to her dying mother, still looking for someone to give her a ride she'll never complete. And I'm still not sure if she's trying to save people from her fate, or if she's just adding them to it, one driver at a time. My name is Brenda Martinez, and I've been a postal worker for the United States Postal Service for 18 years. I started as a mail carrier right out of high school, walking residential routes in suburban Portland. Over the years, I worked my way up to a supervisory position at the main processing facility downtown. I've handled everything from holiday mail rushes to suspicious packages, and I've always prided myself on being level-headed and practical. In my line of work, you learn to pay attention to details and trust what you see with your own eyes. But what happened during my solo hiking trip in the Cascade Range last July changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there in the wilderness. I'm telling this story because I need people to understand that some things can't be explained away, no matter how much you want them to be, just your imagination playing tricks on you. The divorce papers were finalized on a Thursday in late June. After 22 years of marriage, Tom and I were officially done. The house felt too quiet, too empty, and I needed to get away from everything that reminded me of the life we'd built together. I'd always loved hiking. It was one of the few things Tom never wanted to do with me. So I decided to take a weekend trip to the mountains by myself. I chose a 12-mile trail in the Cascade Range that I'd read about online. It was rated as moderate difficulty, well-marked, and popular with families. The trail reviews mentioned beautiful views and photo opportunities, which was perfect because I'd recently bought a new digital camera. Taking pictures had become my way of dealing with stress, something to focus on besides the mess my personal life had become. I drove up to the trailhead on Friday evening and stayed at a small motel in the nearest town. The plan was simple: start hiking early Saturday morning, enjoy the ski. Itinerary: take lots of photos, and maybe find some peace of mind along the way. The weather forecast was perfect, clear skies and temperatures in the 70s. Saturday morning I was at the trailhead by 8 a.m. sharp. My backpack was loaded with water, snacks, a first aid kit, and my camera. The parking area was empty except for my car, but I figured other hikers would show up later as the day warmed up. Summer weekends usually brought crowds to the popular trails, and I was actually looking forward to having some solitude for the first few hours. The trail started in a dense forest of Douglas fir and cedar trees. The morning air was cool and fresh, filled with the smell of pine needles and damp earth. Bird songs echoed through the trees, and I could hear a creek running somewhere nearby. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. This was exactly what I needed. I had my camera around my neck, ready to capture anything interesting. The trail was well maintained with clear markers every half mile, just like the reviews had promised. The first couple of miles wound gently upward through the forest, and I stopped frequently to take pictures of wildflowers, interesting rock formations, and shafts of sunlight filtering through the canopy. Around mile 4, I stopped at a small clearing to rest and take some photos of the valley view that had opened up below. The trail behind me disappeared into the shadows between the trees, and ahead it curved around a rocky outcrop. I was completely alone, just the way I wanted it. I raised my camera and looked through the viewfinder to frame a shot of the mountains in the distance. That's when I saw it. A tall figure standing far behind me on the trail, barely visible in the shadows. My finger froze on the shutter button. The figure was motionless, just standing there like it was watching me. I lowered the cam, and turned around to look with my naked eyes. The trail was empty, nothing but trees and shadows and the wooden trail markers. I squinted, scanning the area where I thought I'd seen the figure, but there was no one there. Must have been a tree, I muttered to myself, or shadows playing tricks. I'd been working long hours at the post office for weeks before the divorce was finalized. Stress and lack of sleep could make your eyes see things that weren't there. I took a deep breath and told myself to relax. This was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, not a paranoia trip. I continued hiking, but I found myself glancing back over my shoulder more often than before. The forest felt different somehow, less welcoming. The birdsong seemed quieter, and I realized I hadn't heard that creak in a while. But I pushed these thoughts away and focused on taking pictures. At mile 5, I stopped again to photograph a particularly beautiful section where the trail wound around a massive boulder covered in moss. Without thinking, I took several shots in different directions, including one back down the trail I'd just walked. When I checked the photos on my camera's display screen, my stomach dropped. There it was again. The figure. This time it was closer, maybe 50 yards behind me, standing motionless among the trees just off the trail. It was definitely person-shaped, but something about it looked wrong. I immediately spun around to look behind me. The trail was completely empty. My hands shaking slightly, I zoomed in on the photo. The figure was tall, really tall, maybe 7 feet or more. Its body looked too thin for its height, and its arms seemed too long, hanging down past where its knees should be. The proportions were all wrong, like someone had stretched a person vertically in a computer program. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the trees. "Is someone there?" No answer. Just the whisper of wind through the pine branches. I told myself it was pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns and faces in random shapes. I'd learned about it in a psychology class years ago. When you're alone and stressed, your mind can turn tree trunks and shadows into human figures. That had to be what was happening. But as I looked at the photo again, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was looking directly at me. I started walking faster after that, no longer stopping to rest or enjoy the scenery. Every few hundred yards, I'd take a quick photo over my shoulder without looking at the screen right away. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't help myself. At mile 6, I finally worked up the courage to check the latest photo. The figure was much closer now, maybe 30 yards behind me. I could see more details that made my blood run cold. It was covered in dark, matted hair or fur, and its posture was wrong, hunched forward like it was preparing to pounce. But worst of all, it was clearly following the exact path I had taken. This time when I turned around, I didn't just look. I stared hard at every tree, every shadow, every possible hiding spot. Nothing. The trail behind me looked perfectly normal and completely empty. My heart was pounding now, and I was walking so fast I was almost jogging. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe my camera had some kind of technical problem. Maybe there was moisture in the lens creating weird distortions. Maybe the memory card was corrupted and showing old photos mixed in with new ones. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. At mile 7, I heard a branch snap in the forest to my right. I froze in place and listened. Something large was moving through the trees parallel to the trail. The footsteps were heavy but spaced irregularly, not like a deer or elk, which would move in predictable patterns. This sounded random, chaotic, like something struggling through thick underbrush. I started jogging, my backpack bouncing uncomfortably against my bee. Behind me, the footsteps in the forest sped up, matching my pace. Whatever was out there was keeping up with me, staying hidden in the tree line but never falling behind. Without stopping, I pulled out my camera and took a photo toward the sound of the movement. When I looked at the screen, I nearly stumbled and fell. It was there, clearly visible between the trees. The tall, impossibly thin figure was watching me from maybe 20 feet into the forest. For the first time, I could see its face, and I wished I couldn't. It was mostly human-looking, but elongated like the rest of its body. Its eyes were set too far apart, and its mouth was partially open, revealing what looked like too many teeth. That's when I ran. I didn't care about twisting an ankle or exhausting myself. I ran full speed down the trail, my camera bouncing wildly around my neck. Behind me, the crashing sound in the forest became louder and more urgent. Whatever was following me was no longer trying to be stealthy. I could hear breathing, deep, rhythmic, animalistic, keeping pace with me through the trees. It sounded like a large dog panting, but slower and more deliberate. The sound made my skin crawl. My lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly, but I kept running. The trail markers flashed by, mile 7.5, mile 8. I had 4 miles left to reach the parking area, but I didn't know if I could maintain this pace that long. Then, like a miracle, I saw 2 other hikers coming up the trail toward me. A middle-aged couple with expensive-looking gear and matching hiking poles. I had never been so relieved to see other human beings in my entire life. The moment I spotted them, the crashing sound in the forest stopped. Complete silence except for my ragged breathing and the sound of my footsteps slowing to a walk. "Are you okay?" the woman asked as I approached them. I must have looked terrible, sweating, panicked, glancing constantly over my shoulder. I thought I saw a bear," I managed to say between gasps. It sounded insane to explain what had really happened, and I needed these people to take me seriously. "A bear?" The man looked concerned. "We should report that to the rangers. Did it seem aggressive?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without sounding crazy. With shaking hands, I turned on my camera and took another photo back down the trail. When I checked the screen, the path was empty. Whatever had been following me was gone. "Would you mind if we walked back to the trailhead with you?" I asked. "I'm not comfortable finishing this hike alone." They were kind enough to agree, and we made the return journey together. During the walk, I discreetly reviewed the photos on my camera. I counted 14 separate images with the figure in them. In each one, it was closer than the last. In the final few photos, its mouth appeared to be wide open, and I could see those terrible teeth clearly. What disturbed me most was that in 3 of the photos, I could see there were actually 2 figures, one on each side of the trail. They hadn't been chasing me at all. They had been herding me, working together with obvious intelligence. Back at the trailhead, I found a park ranger checking permits and asked to speak with him privately. When I showed him the photos on my camera, his face went pale. "Can you email these to me immediately?" he asked, giving me his card. "You're the 3rd person this month to photograph something on that trail." He showed me photos on his laptop from other hikers. The same figures appeared in all of them. He told me that search and rescue had found a campsite torn apart on that trail 2 weeks earlier. The hiker was never found, just shredded camping gear and drag marks leading into the dense forest. "We're considering closing the trail," he admitted, "but we can't explain what's happening in any way that would satisfy the higher-ups." When I asked what he thought the figures were, he just shook his head. "People around here have stories going back 100 years, he said, "but I can't put that in an official report." That night, I uploaded all the photos to my computer and examined them closely. When I zoomed in on the final image, I could see the figure's hands clearly. The fingers were impossibly long, ending in dark, curved nails that looked more like claws. 6 months later, I still work for the Postal Service, but I sleep with all the lights on. I keep thinking about those elongated fingers and wondering how fast those things can really move. The ranger emails me occasionally with new photos from other hikers. The figures are still there, still being photographed by people who don't know to look behind them. I've never been hiking alone since that day, and I never will again. Because now I know that some things in the wilderness are watching us, studying us, and hunting us with an intelligence that's far more terrifying than any wild animal. And the worst part? They're still out there. My name is Kevin Martinez, and I've been working as a server at Romano's Italian restaurant in Bend, Oregon for 3 years now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills while I figure out what I really want to do with my life. I'm 26, and honestly, most days blend together. Taking orders, carrying plates, dealing with difficult customers. My girlfriend Lisa works there too. We met during training, and we've been together for about 8 months now. Working in restaurants means you don't get normal weekends off. Our days off are usually Tuesday or Wednesday, when most people are at their regular jobs. Lisa and I try to make the most of these random weekdays by exploring Oregon. We've hiked Mount Bachelor, checked out Crater Lake, visited a bunch of small towns. We both love photography, so we're always looking for cool places to take pictures. That's how we ended up at the Malheur Cave System on a Wednesday in October. I'd found it on a hiking website the night before. The caves are about 2 hours east of Bend, out in the middle of nowhere near Burns. They're lava tubes formed thousands of years ago when molten rock flowed underground and then cooled, leaving these natural tunnels. The website said they were open to the public and had some really amazing rock formations inside. We loaded up my Honda Civic with our camera gear, some water bottles, energy bars, and our phone flashlights. Lisa also printed out a map from the hiking website that showed the main cave route. It looked pretty straightforward. One main tunnel that went about half a mile into the hillside, with a few small side chambers where you could see the lava formations up close. The drive out there was beautiful. Eastern Oregon in October is all golden grasslands and huge open skies. We passed maybe 5 other cars the whole way. When we finally found the cave entrance around noon, there were 3 other cars in the small gravel parking area, which made us feel better about the whole thing. The caves might be remote, but at least we weren't the only people crazy enough to explore them on a Wednesday afternoon. The main entrance was just like the website described, a big opening in the hillside with a metal sign that said, Malheur Cave System, enter at your own risk. There was even a little wooden box with some pamphlets about the geological history. We could hear voices echoing from inside, so we knew other tourists were already exploring. Lisa and I turned on our phone flashlights and headed in. The main tunnel was about 8 feet wide and 10 feet tall, with smooth, curved walls that looked like they'd been carved by flowing water. Our footsteps echoed in the darkness ahead of us. The temperature dropped maybe 20 degrees from outside, which felt good after the warm drive. For the first few minutes, everything was exactly what we expected. We passed a family with 2 young kids coming back toward the entrance. The dad told us the formations about a quarter mile in were really spectacular. We took some photos of the unusual rock textures and the way our flashlight beams lit up the tunnel walls. About half a mile in, we started looking for a good spot to eat our snacks and maybe take some more artistic photos. That's when Lisa noticed something that wasn't on our map. A smaller tunnel branching off to the right from the main path. It was narrower than the main cave, maybe 5 feet wide, but it looked stable and safe enough to explore. Should we check it out? Lisa asked, pointing her flashlight into the side tunnel. It's not on the map, but it looks interesting. I was curious too. We'd come all this way, and the main cave was pretty much what we'd expected. This side tunnel might have formations that fewer people had seen and photographed. Lee, let's just go a little way in, I said. If it gets sketchy, we'll turn around. We stacked some rocks at the entrance to the side tunnel so we could find our way back easily. Then we headed into the narrow passage. Lisa went first, with me following close behind. The side tunnel sloped downward at a steeper angle than the main cave. The walls became rougher, more jagged, like this part hadn't been shaped by flowing lava the same way. Our flashlights cast weird shadows on the uneven surfaces. After about 10 minutes of walking, I noticed the air smelled different. It was damper, more organic, like a basement that had been closed up for too long. Do you smell that? I asked Lisa. She stopped and sniffed. Yeah, it's kind of gross. Maybe there's water down here somewhere? That's when her flashlight beam caught something on the cave wall that made both of us freeze. There were scratch marks in the volcanic rock. Deep gouges arranged in sets of 4, like claw marks. But they weren't old and weathered. They looked fresh. "Kevin," Lisa whispered, "what could make marks like that in solid rock?" I moved closer to examine them. The scratches were definitely recent. You could see where pieces of rock had been scraped away and fallen to the tunnel floor. Some of the marks were at ground level, but others were 8 feet high on the walls. Whatever made them was either really tall or really good at climbing. We kept walking, partly because we were curious and partly because neither of us wanted to admit we were starting to get scared. The tunnel kept descending, and we found more scratch marks every few yards. Some looked like they'd been made by something moving fast, long scrapes that went for several feet along the wall. After another few minutes, the tunnel opened up into a chamber about 30 feet across. Lisa and I both stopped at the entrance and swept our flashlights around the space. There were 4 or 5 other tunnel openings leading off in different directions, but what made us both gasp was what sat in the center of the chamber. It was a pile of bones. Animal bones, arranged in a neat stack about 3 feet high. I could recognize deer skulls, rib cages, what looked like coyote, or maybe dog skulls. All of them were picked completely clean, white and dry. This wasn't some natural place where animals came to die. Someone or something had collected these bones and stacked them here deliberately. "We need to leave," Lisa said immediately. "Now." But I was already pulling out my phone to take pictures. I know it sounds stupid, but I was thinking about how crazy this was, how no one would believe us without proof. I took several shots of the bone pile from different angles, trying to get the full scope of how many bones were there. That's when we heard the sound. It came from one of the tunnel openings across the chamber, a dragging, shuffling noise, like something heavy being pulled across rock. We both froze completely, not even breathing. I pointed my flashlight toward the sound, but the beam just disappeared into the dark tunnel opening. The sound stopped for maybe 10 seconds. Then it started again, but from a different tunnel. Something was definitely moving between the passages, and it knew we were there. "Something's down here with us," Lisa whispered, grabbing my arm hard enough to hurt. Then we heard breathing, wet, labored breathing that echoed from multiple directions at once. It wasn't human breathing. It was too deep, too raspy, like something was wrong with whatever was making the sound. And there was more than one source. Multiple things were breathing in the darkness around us. My mind started racing. There could be homeless people living down here, or maybe some kind of animals we didn't know about. But the bone pile, the scratch marks in solid rock, the coordinated movement between tunnels, none of that fit with any normal explanation. We started backing toward the tunnel we'd come from, keeping our flashlights moving between the different openings. That's when I saw something that made my blood freeze. At the edge of my flashlight beam, something pale moved quickly from one tunnel to another. It was low to the ground, but definitely not an animal. The shape was wrong, too long and thin. "Run," I told Lisa. We turned and ran back through the descending tunnel, stumbling on the uneven floor. Behind us, I could hear multiple sets of footsteps. Not normal footsteps, but the sound of claws scraping on stone with each step. Whatever was following us was fast and getting closer. Lisa tripped and went down hard. I pulled her up and we kept running, but now I could hear breathing right behind us, getting closer every second. The sounds echoed off the tunnel walls until it seemed like we were being chased by a whole pack of something. When we finally saw our rock marker and scrambled back into the main cave tunnel, the sounds stopped immediately. Complete silence. I looked back with my flashlight and caught a glimpse that will give me nightmares for the rest of my life. There were 3 or 4 pale figures crouched at the entrance to the side tunnel. They were humanoid but wrong in every way, hunched over, with arms and legs that were too long and thin. Their skin looked white and hairless, almost translucent. And they were just sitting there, watching us, like they were waiting for something. But they wouldn't come into the main cave tunnel. Whatever they were, they stayed in their domain and let us go. Lisa and I ran through the main cave until we burst out into sunlight. There was that same family from earlier getting ready to leave. They stared at us. We were filthy from falling, clearly panicked, probably looked half crazy. I found a park volunteer in the parking area, an older guy wearing a Forest Service vest. When I tried to tell him what we'd seen, his face went completely pale. "Which tunnel did you go into?" he asked urgently. I described the location and he immediately got on his radio. Within 20 minutes, a park ranger showed up in a Forest Service truck. He took our statement very seriously, asking detailed questions about exactly what we'd seen and heard. "That tunnel has been reported before," he told us. "The cave system is much bigger than what's open to the public. There are miles of unexplored tunnels back there, some of them going down hundreds of feet." Other people had reported hearing things, seeing movement, finding bone piles just like what we'd found. The ranger said they weren't sure what was living back there. Could be transients, could be animals, could be something else entirely. "Why don't you investigate?" I asked. The ranger was quiet for a long moment. "We tried," he finally said. 3 years ago, we sent a team with cameras into that side tunnel. They went about half a mile in and found evidence of habitation. Sleeping areas, more bone piles, scratch marks everywhere on the walls. The team had also found human remains, old remains, clothing scraps from different time periods going back decades. The exploration was called off when team members reported being followed and hearing vocalizations that didn't sound human. "Whatever's in there has been there a long time," the ranger said. "It knows those tunnels better than we ever will." He told us the side tunnel entrance was now blocked with a locked gate, but he admitted the tunnel system had other entrances scattered throughout the wilderness. There was no way to seal them all. That night, I uploaded the photos from my phone to my laptop. When I zoomed in on the shot of the bone pile, I saw something that made me want to throw up. In the background of the photo, barely visible in one of the tunnel openings, there was a pale, hairless face with dark, hollow eyes looking directly at the camera. They'd been watching us the entire time we were in that chamber. We were never alone down there. I started researching online and found reports of missing hikers in the Malheur area going back decades. There were stories from local Native American tribes about cave dwellers that emerged at night to hunt. I found an account from a rancher in 1902 who described finding his livestock dragged into cave openings with claw marks scratched into the rocks nearby. It's been 6 months since our trip to Malheur. I still work at Romano's, but I can't handle being underground anymore. I won't even go into the restaurant's basement to get supplies. Lisa and I are still together, but we don't talk about what happened. We both know what we saw down there, and we know it's still there. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking about those pale figures crouched at the tunnel entrance, watching us leave. They're still down there in those miles of unexplored caves, still collecting bones, still dragging things down into the dark. And now, they know what we look like. I've never been back to Eastern Oregon, and I never will. Some places are meant to stay unexplored, and some things are better left alone in the darkness where they belong.